Welcome to the next chapter of EVERNIGHT by Ross Mackenzie. It's the 10th chapter today and it's called Whispering Books. The rain fell. It ain't natural. Weather like this in summer. Lady, light, save us. On Slipknot Road, the water's up to your knees. I reckon it's the hags, you know. They've cursed us. The king should do something. What's the hagging point of having a squad of white witches if he won't hag and use them? Gossip like this was spreading all around the slums. It was always the same, wasn't it? Whenever something happened that people could not explain, they would automatically blame the hags from across the sea in Westerly Witch. If there was a drought and the crops failed, oh, it must be the hags. If the winter was especially cold and the river froze, the hags have cursed us. If a dog became rabid and foamed at the mouth, it's been touched by a hag, and so on. Lara had always believed that this was stuff and nonsense because the war had been over for hundreds of years, hadn't it? And if the hags ever did see fit to attack, then they would do a lot worse than turn a few stupid dogs loopy or make some waterfall from the bleeding sky, wouldn't they? Still, there was no denying the rain was a nuisance. She could not return to the sewers because the underground streams had risen to a dangerous level. So she found herself out in the streets of Kingshaven, sniffing around for food and opportunity. And in a city like this, with so many people and dark corners and twisting lanes, there was opportunity everywhere. Sometimes it came in the form of a freshly baked meat pie cooling on a window ledge, or the glisten of a coin in an unguarded pocket. Perhaps today it was an argument at a fruit stall. I'm telling you, these apples is rotten. Rotten? How dare you, madam? I want my money back. Ha! Money back, she says. Lara slipped in unseen and, quick as a snake, snatched 2 shiny red apples from the stall. She finished the first in seconds, core and seeds and all, and she smacked her lips and licked the juice from her fingers. The rain became a sheet of falling water, bouncing off the cobbles, and Lara ducked under the legs of a stationary iron hut to shelter beneath its metal body, listening to the trick and swirl of the iron horse's enchanted clockwork inside. Oi! Get out of it! The driver aimed a kick at her, but she dodged it, tossed a few of her best curse words at him, and ran away up the street, shielding her face from the sting of wind and rain. When her locket began suddenly to vibrate against her chest again, she stopped so sharply that an old lady barged into the back of her and pushed past, cursing. Lara's hand clutched the locket through her clothes. It pulsed and buzzed with worrying ferocity. Lara heard a musical whisper drifting in the air. The shock of it was almost too much to bear. The sound, it seemed, was coming from a nearby store, and as Lara took a faltering step towards the door, the locket's vibration intensified. It was as if it was speaking to her, guiding her like a compass. Listen to the locket, Granny had told her. An impulse need took a hold of Lara. She opened the door and ducked into the shop. The door closed and the roar of the storm died away. She was met with a deep hush and the smell of dust and old paper and leather. It was a bookshop. It seemed she was in luck. There was nobody behind the counter, no uppity shopkeeper to chase her away. So she shook the worst of the weather from her clothes and hair and began to look around the bookcases with great curiosity. All the while her locket buzzed, and the sound of musical, fragile, crystalline whispers filled her head. She had never been in a bookshop before. Why would she? She could not eat or drink books. Her fingers stroked the spines, and suddenly she was back in Miss Ratchet's orphanage classroom, drawing letters of the alphabet with chalk on a piece of slate. A, B, C. You call that a C, Fox? Hold out your hand. Snap. If you cry, it'll be another lash of the cane. Now scrub that out and try again. Lara chased the thoughts away and realised, as she wiped the sweat from her forehead, that she was shaking. She reached into her shirt, bringing the locket out into the dim shop light. It sat in the palm of her hand, vibrating as if there was an insect trapped inside. Enchanted, Lara followed the melody until she reached a bookcase, and the locket gave a small leap in her hand. Lara let it drop, her gaze shifting to the bookcase, where one of the books was buzzing and trembling. She made a half step towards the exit. Part of her was frightened and wanted to leave, but her hand ached to reach out and touch the book. Slowly, delicately, Lara's fingers closed around the vibrating book. Clank! She let go with a gasp, and the book snapped back into place. Then a quite extraordinary thing happened. With a low rumble, the bookcase lowered into the floor until, clank, the top of it had become just another floorboard. Where the bookcase had been, there was now an opening, and through the opening, a darkened chamber filled with more bookcases and columns of haphazardly placed books. The whispering intensified, and Lara knew somehow that it was coming from these secret books. She stared around in frightened wonder. Was this hag magic? How can I help you, love? Lara had been alone. She was sure of it. But now a woman stood beside her in the hidden doorway. She was apple-cheeked and had a thick head of tight-cropped chestnut hair all marbled with silver. She wore an itchy-looking knitted dress of many patchwork colours and held a cigar between her thin lips. To Lara's surprise, she did not seem angry to discover a strange, soaking wet child in her shop. Curious, certainly, but not angry at all. Her smiling eyes went to the locket, and she tilted her head. That's a pretty thing. Where did you get it? I'm sorry, said Lara. I'm lost. I came in by mistake. The woman stared at her. You sure about that, love? Yes, sorry. I have to go, sorry. Lara pushed past the woman, her hand pressing tight against the locket, through the shop and out into the storm. The rain was still battering down, but the sting of the raindrops seemed distant now because Lara's mind was somewhere else, filled with wonderings and confusion and thoughts of whispering books. Turning a corner onto Needle Street, Lara almost tripped over a pure collector crouched in the road, shoveling horse manure into her bucket. Watch out! Oh, shut your hanging mouth! On she went, head down, collar turned up to the driving rain, darting along an alley off Needle Street, under a railway arch, past a blacksmith and an ironworks, the whistle and rumble of a steam train shaking the ground. On the other side of the arch, Lara crossed Station Road, past one of the huge brick factories where the white witches made their spells, dull grey smoke belching from the chimneys. When two white witches exited the spell factory, the sleeves of their robes, scorched from working all day over hot cauldrons, Lara could not help staring at their blank, waxy faces in grim fascination. She'd heard white witches were cursed at birth with powerful magic, and that the kingdom took away their souls. Children were taught from a very young age that magic was, under no circumstances, to be messed with, that if they ever came across a bottle of magic, then they were not to touch it. Doing so was dangerous, and if you survived the magic, you would not survive the punishment for messing with it. Magic was something to be feared then, and if this was the case, then white witches, those strange, soulless creatures, should be feared too, shouldn't they? And yet, Lara wasn't frightened of them. Now she had the unaccountable urge to speak to them, to ask them about magic and her locket. Watching them, Lara felt for the first time that the world of magic was a glistening web, and she was in danger of becoming ensnared. When the witches were out of sight, Lara continued her journey, soon realising that, without thinking about it, she was walking to the docks. The sounds of the place, the cursing and laughter of the men, the groans of the steam cranes, the thrumming engines and slow, deep horns echoed all around her. The rain had softened to a dull drizzle, and Lara stretched and took in a big lungful of air. Oh, how she loved the smells here. 100 different scents danced together, each more wonderful than the last. Wooden boats brought fragrant spices from the other side of the Silver Kingdom, pepper and cinnamon and powdered moonweed, and those aromas mingled with the perfume of the other vessels, the dry warmth of dragon breath in hulking metal boats from the north, and the burning heat of fire whiskey from the south, and the salt tang seaweed of the river Anchor itself. As she walked across the crates of coal and starfish and barrels of dragon breath, she felt that vibration against her chest again, a thrum like the wings of a bee. And among the sounds of the docks, the rumbles and clangs and yells, there was once more that delicate, crystalline melody. Was she losing her marbles? Had she breathed in some gas in the sewers that didn't agree with her? Or had she maybe walked through some flushed away forbidden hag spell that had begun rotting away her mind? Whatever this was, it was impossible to ignore. Some of the music was coming from her locket, and she looked around and wondered if anybody else could hear it. But the dock workers either could not, or were paying it no attention. And part of the sound was coming from nearby. Lara tried to block out the other noises, to concentrate, and she found that she was listening not just with her ears, but with something else inside her, something she couldn't quite describe. It was as if the sound had reached into her chest and wrapped around her heart and was pulling at her. She went to the river and stared along the rows of boats, breathing in the steam and smoke from their engines. Her gaze rested on a small, unremarkable vessel with the name Dragonfly painted on the side in gold. The vibration thrummed harder against her chest. Inching towards the boat, she scouted around for the crew and waited and watched until she was certain that they were not around. It was perfectly ordinary for a boat's crew to unload their cargo and head straight for the taverns in the city. Lara's hand was still pressing against the locket. She stared at the boat, walked to the gangplank, placed one foot on the metal walkway. But this was mad. She could be caught at any moment. The locket buzzed more intently than ever against her skin, urging her on, and the twinkling sound seemed to grow clearer. Granny's words echoed around her head. The locket. Do you still have the locket? Keep it safe. Listen to it. Listen to it. Was it trying to speak to her now? Was it telling her that something important was on this boat? Had the locket somehow guided her into the bookshop too? But why? These were the thoughts of someone losing their mind, surely. And yet there it was again, that wonderful ache in her chest, pulling at a part of her she could not identify. She took one last look around the busy docks, checked that no one was watching, and then she breathed deep and hurried across the gangplank.